This video is about the cases that everybody is going to be talking about in the next year. If you like true crime cases, if you follow crime, if you like to watch that, you are going to know about these cases. You're going to want to know about them, and they will be inescapable over the next year. They are fascinating. They're horrifying. They're drama packed, and they are all going to trial in the next year. Now, Monday on this channel, we're going to be covering 6 lesser known cases that everyone is going to be talking about by the end of the year. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But for tonight, we are going to be talking about the 5 cases that I think will be the biggest impact of the entire year. So hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's video. Happy New Year. I hope you all had a great time over the holidays, that you enjoyed your holiday celebrations, Christmas, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrated. And also, I really hope that you are starting off with a Happy New Year. Now, some of you may have seen the post that I did for today's video. And when I put out my post, I got some really good questions. One was, what about Luigi Mangione? It's a huge case. You've been talking about it. You've been posting about it. And that's absolutely true. I have. But I wanted to limit tonight to cases that are going to trial in the next year. And currently, that case is not scheduled for trial. My bet would be that it won't go to trial in the next year, anytime during 2025. It might, but it definitely hasn't been scheduled yet. Another one you may be wondering about is the Rex Heuermann case. He is the alleged Gilgo Beach serial killer. That case is going to be huge. Now, the judge was planning to set the trial date at the hearing this past December, but instead, the prosecution charged Heuermann with yet another murder, a 7th murder. This is truly one of the most horrifying and disturbing cases I have ever heard of. But again, for purposes of tonight, there's not a trial date. The judge did not set one given the new charges. I would not be surprised if that case, again, doesn't go to trial in 2025. So we will be covering and talking about those cases over the course of the next year, but I'm not expecting them to go to trial. And what this list is about is the ones that are going to trial. I am really excited to be back with y'all. First 5 in the chat tonight. Special shout out to you. It was Desert Rose, Michael Lalonde, Teresa, Mel Stiller, and Bupsy. Now, you please be sure to hit the like button if you would, and subscribe to the channel. Remember, Monday, we're going to be covering 6 cases that almost nobody knows about. If you've been following this channel, you probably know about those cases, but there are some twists, some turns, some new information about it that we're going to be covering on Monday. And if you haven't followed this channel before, you are going to want to follow these cases because they are absolutely huge. Now, I also have some huge news about next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, I will be having some very special guests on the show. They are the attorneys for Richard Allen. Will actually be on our show. They will be answering questions and talking to us about the case, what they have to say about it. I will also be extending an invitation to the prosecutors, but I am especially delighted that I am going to be able to talk to the people who helped to put on the case that we followed so intensely. If you've been following the channel, you know that I went to Delphi, Indiana, and actually was present personally at the trial of Richard Allen. And so the chance to get to talk to some of the people who were closely involved, I think, will be a real opportunity for us. So be sure to subscribe. That's going to be really important, and put the notifications on. All right, well, let's get started with the 5 true crime cases that I think are going to be the biggest cases of the entire year. Number 5, starting with number 5, going up to number 1, giving you an idea of what the ones I think are going to be. And it was hard ranking them. It was hard even figuring out, okay, which are the ones I'm going to put in the first 5 and which are the 6 lesser known. But for this one, number 5, I put Donna Adelson. You know, if you have been around this channel, and let me go ahead and add to the stage so you can see a picture of Donna Adelson. If you have been around this channel, you know about the case of Donna Adelson. She is now charged with murder in the murder of Dan Markel. Now, all the way back in 2014, Donna's ex son-in-law, Dan Markel, was murdered. He was a law professor at Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida. And as he pulled into his garage, it was an open air garage. He pulled in, it was summer 2014, and two men walked up to his car and shot him. At the time of his death, Dan Markel was divorced from Wendy Adelson, who was also an attorney. The couple had two boys, and they were locked in a bitter battle over custody of the two kids. Wendy wanted to take the boys to Miami to be nearer her family. Dan, pretty obviously, wanted to stay near his job in Tallahassee. Police tracked the two hitmen using video and toll booth video. They tracked the two hitmen, found Luis Rivera, who confessed, and Sigfredo Garcia, who was found guilty at trial. Now, authorities were absolutely convinced that Rivera and Garcia were hired by Garcia's girlfriend, Katie Medbanwa. And I know it gets confusing, so let me go ahead and switch this over. We did this. This is actually a graphic done by the prosecution. And you can see Donna Adelson is the one going to trial. She's married to Harvey. Charlie was on trial about a year, almost, well, 2 years ago, really now. Katie Medbanwa was Charlie's girlfriend and also the on-again, off-again girlfriend of Sigfredo Garcia. Now, what the prosecutor says happened is Donna and Charlie, this is the allegation, Donna and Charlie, through Katie, hired the two hitmen. They hired Sigfredo Garcia and his friend, Luis Rivera, to put out this hit on Dan Markel, the professor and the ex-son-in-law. Wendy Adelson has never been charged. Many people think Wendy Adelson is the ultimate goal of the prosecution. They want to put the case back to her. So far, they haven't, and so far, she has been actively involved in the cases. She has testified at every trial so far. So as for right now, she has not been charged. So, and I'll pull this out so I can just talk to you for a minute. So Charlie was, as I mentioned, was tried, and it started with Luis Rivera pleading guilty. Then Sigfredo Garcia was convicted at a jury trial. There was a hung jury as to Katie. There was another trial, and Katie was then convicted. So all three of them have been convicted, and both Luis Rivera and Katie then testified at Charlie's trial. Charlie was arrested. He was tried, and in November of 2023, he was found guilty. It was just 2 weeks later that authorities arrested his mother, Donna Adelson, as she was attempting to leave the country for Vietnam, a country that does not have an extradition treaty with the United States. And the prosecution says, yeah, she was just trying to get out before we actually could find her and try her for the case. She has now languished in jail for more than a year. She was set to go to trial this past fall, but a regular circus erupted when Charlie objected to the fact that the same lawyer who had represented him was now representing his mother and would be cross-examining Charlie Adelson at trial. He was set to testify. He had been brought to the area, and he said, no, I don't agree to being cross-examined by my former attorney. So the judge then disqualified Donna Adelson's other attorney. She got new ones and is cruising to trial in April of this year. Meanwhile, Charlie Adelson says he ought to get a new trial. He says the fact that his attorney had represented the entire family, including Donna Adelson, before his trial means that his attorney had a conflict of interest when it came to representing him at his trial. I think it's probably a pretty good argument. If Charlie wins on appeal, Charlie might be getting a new trial this year or next. And if that goes to trial, I would instantly add it to the top 5 because that was extremely interesting, very closely watched, heavily covered by many YouTubers across the true crime area. So let me say hi, Michael. Thank you. Holidays were very good. I'm glad to be back, but I enjoyed my time. Even though it was away from y'all, I seriously enjoyed the time. I did see your dog next to the tree. Actually, your dog with antlers made the list. If you're a member, and I know Michael is, then we had a members only stream right before the holiday. And one of the things we did was people sent in photographs of their Christmas decorations and wearing Christmas sweaters and fun things like that. And Michael, your dog was in there, was wearing antlers. And Annie K has been a member for 10 months. That is just awesome. And here is to 2025. It is going to be quite the year. The cases, I think, for a couple of reasons. The first is we've been covering these cases, building up to them, because I've now been on YouTube for about a couple of years now. So I've been building up to these cases. So we have some background for these now. And I think that's really going to make covering them extra interesting. And I think also that it's going to be extremely interesting to cover the cases that are going to be so important. These are cases that will be covered heavily in the media. The ones I'm covering today, you're going to be reading about them everywhere. The ones I'm going to cover on Monday are lesser known. They're important, but they're not as well known. So let's head into Karen Read. Karen Read clearly was in the top 10 most controversial cases of 2024. But bizarrely, also will be in the top 10 most controversial cases of 2025 because the case is back for round 2. Now, here's what happened. On the morning of January 29, 2022, John O'Keefe, who was a well-respected Boston police officer, was found dead in a snowbank outside a home in Canton, Massachusetts. Police say he was struck by a vehicle, Karen's vehicle. But John wasn't found outside his own house. He wasn't found, outside Karen's home. He was found in the snow outside the home of another Boston police officer, Brian Albert. The prosecution says Karen and John were drinking at the Waterfall Bar. Karen doesn't disagree with that. The question of the drinking is more of a question, but she agrees that's where they were, that she was drinking. They were both drinking with Brian Albert, with other people. The bar closed for the night. And so they decided, let's keep the fun going. Let's continue the party at Brian's home. So Karen dropped John off, but she opted not to go to the party that night. So the two sides differ wildly about what happened next. The prosecution says Karen backed into John, maybe intentionally, they argue, as he was getting out of the car and headed into the party. Now, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts left its options open. The jury was free to decide that she backed into him intentionally, free to decide that it was just an accident. Either way, they wanted a conviction. Karen's team says John O'Keefe actually did make it inside that home in Canton, Massachusetts. Something went wrong after that the people inside the house beat John O'Keefe up and dragged him outside. And they decided, with the help of some corrupt police officers, to pin the crime on Karen Read. The first trial was dramatically controversial. The defense was aided greatly by a federal investigation that exposed the conduct of the police officers who were investigating John O'Keefe's death. So the jury hung, and the judge had to declare a mistrial and dismissed all the jurors. But that was only the beginning of a brand new problem, because before a week even had passed, the controversy over that case just got bigger and bigger throughout the trial. There have been protesters, people outside the courthouse, and there was lots of argument about whether or not there was a cover-up. But now there was a new question, because the defense said that jurors were contacting them and saying that the jury wasn't truly hung on every count, that the jury had actually reached a conclusion on the two most serious counts against Karen Read, that they had concluded she was not guilty of second-degree murder and not guilty of leaving the scene of personal injury and death. Now, they did disagree on the least serious charge, which was manslaughter. So Karen's team said, well, we want you to call the jury back in, affirm that this is true, and then dismiss those 2 counts. There is now going to be a second trial. It is going, no matter whether that is actually done or not, this is going to be a dramatically different case. To give you just a couple of reasons, there's going to be a new prosecutor. Adam Lally, the prosecutor last time, became a lightning rod of controversy for people who supported Karen Read's side of the case. But a new prosecutor is going to handle the trial. It just will be different. In any time a new lawyer comes in, it's going to be different. Now, second, one of the most important pieces of evidence for the defense may be missing at trial number 2. That is the infamous Haas Lawn to Die in Cold Google search that was made by Jennifer McCabe. Jennifer McCabe was the sister-in-law of the homeowner, Brian Albert. She had been at the party that night. She'd been at the Waterfall Bar and then had been at the party. Now, a download of her phone showed she had searched Haas Lawn to Die in the Cold. That became extremely controversial. Karen Read's team hired an expert who said that search was made at 2:30 in the morning, long before Jennifer McCabe should have known anything about John O'Keefe lying dead in the front yard. She should have had no way of knowing that had happened. If nobody discovered John O'Keefe until 6:30 in the morning the next day, how did she know to make that search? So they believe this shows a conspiracy was going on and that the people inside the house hurt John O'Keefe and then dragged him outside to die in the cold. The prosecution says the search was made at 6:24 a.m., not at 2:30 in the morning, and that it was not made until Jennifer McCabe arrived back at the house. She was with Karen Read, and they were looking for John O'Keefe, who was missing. What the prosecution says happened is the women came up, they found John lying in the snow, and Karen yelled, could he be alive? And Jennifer started Googling, how long does it take to die in the cold? Like, if he's been here all night, would he be dead? Could he still be alive? And that's what she was doing. That's why she typed that message in. So now there's a new wrinkle in this. The prosecution says it now has proof that the search was made at the later time. Now, both sides used a software called Cellebrite. The version that the prosecution used was an older version, and it showed the search was made later. The defense used a newer version, and it showed the search was made earlier. So the defense version supported Karen Read's side of the case. Now, they believe that Karen Read's expert, so the prosecution says, well, Cellebrite has now updated, which they read would mean corrected its software, that there was some kind of glitch or now been updated. And they argue that Karen Read's expert now needs to either admit that the expert was just wrong. This search was done at 6:30 in the morning, not at 2:30, or 6:24 in the morning, not 2:30, or the expert should be thrown out. The expert shouldn't be allowed to testify because this has been updated and it's no longer a viable argument that this was made in the middle of the night by Jennifer McCabe before she could have known about John O'Keefe lying in the snow. Now, both sides also have done, and there hasn't been a ruling yet from the court on that, but it is being argued right now. Both sides have done more work looking at the computer system in Karen Read's car. We don't know a lot yet about what they found. We just know that they're both looking at that, and they've sent experts and are looking for more data and more information. So one thing we know for sure is that the Karen Read trial is going to be extremely controversial, but it's also going to be very different from what happened last time. We don't fully know how it will be different. We just know it's not going to be the same case. People are going to assume, oh, this will just be a repeat of the first trial. I'm predicting, though, it's going to be very different. And I think it's going to be one of the most surprising and controversial trials of the year, just like it was last time. Michael telling me his dog's name is Freckles. That's awesome. Very, very nice. Okay, let's take a look at the next case, which is the Stephen Stearns case. Now, Stephen Stearns, and let me share the screen with you. This is Stephen Stearns. He is accused, and I'll go into it. I don't even like that picture. This is Maddie Stearns and her mother, Maddie Soto and her mother, Jennifer Soto. Many of you will know about this case. We haven't really covered it much on the channel. I do think it's going to be an important case that will go to trial in the next year. Stephen Stearns has not just one, but two different trials scheduled, both for this year. Now, the first is related to possession of P word related to underage girls. The second is even more serious. It's for the SV and the murder of a young girl, Madeline Soto. She was just 13 years old, and she was the daughter of Stephen Stearns's currently off-again girlfriend. Maddie's mother, Jennifer, it's a bizarre case. Maddie's mother, Jennifer, says she needed good sleep that night, so she sent Stephen and Maddie to sleep together in a separate room. A 13-year-old girl and her ex-boyfriend, she sent them to sleep together in a separate bedroom. The next day, Maddie didn't show up for school. Stephen Stearns and Maddie's mother, Jennifer Soto, claimed that Stephen Stearns had dropped Maddie off near the school that morning, but the school officials confirmed she never actually arrived at school that day. There's video footage from the parking lot of a church showing what law enforcement believes is Maddie's body clad in a green sweater and sitting in the passenger side front seat next to Stearns. So the female is slumped to one side. Stearns would later claim, okay, she was asleep. Surveillance footage also showed Stephen Stearns throwing something into a trash can. The prosecutors, the investigators believe that was Maddie's school laptop and backpack, and that he was getting rid of them because he had murdered her and she no longer would need them, and maybe they would even have evidence against him. There was a witness who said that someone, a man matching Stearns's description, appeared to be changing a car tire next to the road. And later, deputies would find Maddie's body in a wooded area near where the man had been seen changing his tire. When police arrested Stearns, they searched his phone and they found images showing that he had SV'd Maddie for years. And remember, she was only 13 at the time, and yet they say it was 4 years before that. Disgustingly, he had also filmed and photographed his crimes against her. This case is definitely a horrifying one. Probably the most suspense around this case relates to the mother of Maddie, to Jennifer Soto. A lot of people wonder whether she is going to be charged, whether for SV, whether for the murder of her own daughter. They just wonder about what exactly will happen related to her. Was she involved? Did she have knowledge about this? It is a very controversial case, and I think a lot of people will be following it and watching it. A truly horrific crime, and I think people will want to see justice served in this particular case. So I want to talk too about, just for a minute, these are all trials that are scheduled for 2025. But if you have been in the legal field, even briefly, you will know trials that are scheduled, hearings that are scheduled, anything that gets scheduled is also subject to being changed and postponed. I've included them because they actually have trial dates that seem firm. Probably at least a couple of these will end up getting put off till the next year, or maybe until later in the year than they're presently scheduled for. One of the things I would really like to know is which are the cases that most intrigue you? Which are the ones you most want to learn more about and to find out more about what happens in the legal case? So, the next one I want to talk about is the case of Sean Diddy Combs. Um, let me put that up. I will add that to the screen. Okay. Sean Diddy Combs, obviously well known music mogul, rap artist, and he has been charged with a litany of pretty much worst possible racketeering charges: kidnapping, arson, bribery, tampering with a witness, forced labor, trafficking, prostitution, lots of other illegal activities, and possession with intent to distribute. The indictment against him is pretty light on details. We don't get a lot from what has been announced so far. This is a federal case. We did learn that he's charged with kicking, dragging, and throwing a vase at a woman, and that it was all caught on videotape. Now, based on a video floating around the internet, we can pretty much guess those charges relate to his ex-girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. She was in a long-term relationship with Diddy for about 11 years, and she filed her own civil suit in 2023. Diddy nearly instantly settled that case very rapidly. We're told that a lot of the events happened, and we get this from one of the complaints that was filed, at parties called freak-offs. And these parties are described in some of the civil complaints in more detail, but they're also mentioned in the federal complaint against Diddy, the criminal complaint against Diddy. And what we learned from these is these were elaborate parties. A lot of the things that happened at these parties were actually captured on videotape. Diddy did this to himself. He hired somebody to actually videotape these parties and what was occurring. Now, from what we understand, illicit drugs were a part of the scene at these parties and were a part of what occurred and why these things occurred. Let me go ahead and pull that out, and I'll talk to y'all a little bit more. So, there were some details in the federal case, but there are a lot more details that are sort of filtering out into the public from civil lawsuits that have been filed. A lot of them were filed in the Southern District of New York, which is where the criminal charges are pending, but not all of them. There is a Texas attorney who says he represents more than 100 accusers who are going to be or have filed civil suits against Diddy. This litigation is going to be enormous. And by enormous, I don't just mean in terms of the public or anything like that. I mean that it is going to be sprawling. It's going to be across multiple courts. It's going to be across multiple cases. Some of the cases relate to women who were underage at the time of the alleged incidents. For example, the attorney I mentioned from Texas filed one case in October on behalf of a woman who says she was just 13. She was repeatedly R-worded by both Diddy and a music mogul and a rapper, Jay-Z, that another unnamed female celebrity watched. We don't know who that would be. Now, Jay-Z has been extremely vocal in saying he absolutely denies these charges. He did not do this. These are utterly and completely false. This has spawned an entirely separate back and forth lawsuit between the lawyer who filed the case and Jay-Z. They have their own case going back and forth. Now, the attorney says that Jay-Z's company tried to pay the attorney's former clients to sue him. And they even used fake badges to impersonate Texas state officials to try to intimidate these clients. Jay-Z, on the other hand, has sued the attorney for extortion, saying that the attorney said, well, I'm going to go public with this lawsuit. It's going to be a public lawsuit. And that was a threat to him solely to try to force him to settle these claims. Now, so one of the things we know about this case is it's not going to be wrapped up in a criminal case. The criminal case is set to go forward in April. I would guess there's a decent chance it will go forward either in April or as soon after that as they can get it going. The reason being, Diddy is actually incarcerated, and his best shot at getting out is, of course, going forward to trial. Is it likely that he'll get out? No, not particularly likely, but it's his only shot. Otherwise, he will continue to be in jail awaiting his trial and awaiting a decision on whether he should be allowed out. He has applied for bail repeatedly, and it has been repeatedly denied. One of the reasons the court cited is that they believe he might try to intimidate or threaten witnesses. So they're not letting him out. That's where he's stuck. So I think that trial will happen pretty soon. But that's not the end of that case. That's, in fact, only the beginning of that case. The criminal is important, but there are all the civil cases around it in courts all over the country. So this is a very sprawling, big litigation. Now, the final, in the case that I think is going to be the biggest, the most watched case of the year, and I'll go ahead and get my photograph up for you. You will instantly recognize Bryan Kohberger. Bryan Kohberger, of course, is accused of creeping into a Moscow, Idaho home in the wee hours of November 13th of 2022. He killed two best friends, Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen, in an upstairs bedroom with a K-bar knife. He also killed a third roommate and her boyfriend on the main floor of the house. 6 weeks later, Bryan Kohberger was arrested. It was December 30th, 2022, and he was arrested. He was a previously unknown 28-year-old PhD student in criminology, and he was arrested at his parents' home. Let me go ahead and pull this out. He was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. At the time of the murders, he had been a student and teaching assistant at Washington State University, but at least from what we understand on the internet, was not allowed to come back to the school. The exact details of that aren't really known. The evidence in Kohberger's case is not as strong as in a lot of other cases. The prosecutors are seeking the death penalty, though, at least as of right now. Another roommate saw a man leaving the house at about the time of the murders, described him as having dark hair, bushy eyebrows, wearing a mask, which could describe Bryan Kohberger if he were wearing a mask. Kohberger acknowledges he was driving his white Hyundai Elantra around the time of the crime, and video evidence supposedly shows the vehicle in the area where the house is located, not at the house, but in the area. Now, prosecutors say it wasn't the first time he had been in that area, and they also find it very suspicious that he turned his phone off right before the murders and then back on afterwards, that he was driving around with his phone off. The most important evidence of the case, though, was found on a knife sheath that was left under the body of Madison Mogen on the bed in her room. And the police found the most important piece of evidence on that sheath. What they found was a bit of male DNA. They say it statistically matches to Bryan Kohberger. And they took a swab from his cheek after he was arrested, and they say this matches. Apparently, Kohberger had not been crazy enough, I guess, to submit his DNA to the database right before committing a very sensational crime. But we do understand that some relative of Kohberger's had submitted DNA, and it was close enough to pinpoint that person as an immediate relative of the person who left the DNA at the scene. So law enforcement did trace it back to Bryan Kohberger, and then so they traced basically up the genetic genealogy tree to Bryan Kohberger. This is an extremely controversial issue within the law right now. It's new because of the fact that we have not had investigative genetic genealogy for a long time. It's something where the law is developing and figuring out what will the rules be around this. So that genetic tracing went back to Bryan Kohberger. He's now charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and with burglary. The investigators have, I think actually they may have dropped the burglary charge, as I recall. Investigators linked him to the crime using that DNA evidence and also using the car, as I mentioned. And they also said he had been surveilling the area and that he came back to the area the day after the crime, the morning after the murders were committed. He said he's not guilty. He's also hinted that he may argue that he was framed by someone else. Maybe the DNA on the knife sheath was left there by someone else. I think this is going to be the most watched case of 2025. The only possible exception would be if for some reason Luigi Mangione actually goes to trial this year. I think it's unlikely to happen this year, but other than that, I think this will be the biggest case. And this is why I think that. First of all, the crimes were brutal. 4 college students were savagely attacked in the middle of the night while they were sleeping in what was probably just a matter of minutes. Secondly, the fact that Kohberger was studying criminology really is an odd twist. Like, why? Why did he choose that field? Did he want to learn how to commit a murder? I think it's left a lot of questions and people want answers, but it's a pretty chilling fact. Thirdly, I think the case has some controversy, particularly around the issue of that investigative genetic genealogy. He had never put his DNA into a database. Someone in his family apparently had. And from that, they tracked him down. So there are some serious legal questions that are going to affect future cases. Should the police be allowed to track criminals using DNA databases? Should there be limits on that? What if the relatives, for example, said no, they didn't want their DNA used for that purpose? There are some databases, like, for example, Ancestry.com, that say law enforcement cannot use them to trace criminals or in any way. So what if, and I'm not saying it happened here, but these are the kinds of questions I think that the law is going to have to answer. What if law enforcement does use a database where it said you can't use that? What if they actually find a criminal? What do we think? What will the law find is correct in a situation like that? I don't think that's going to be an issue here, but it is going to be an issue soon in some case. So what we're doing with this case is we're kind of exploring the outer edges of DNA technology and what it's going to mean in the legal field, what it's going to mean to cases, to murder, to true crime cases. These are questions, in my view, we absolutely should be talking about. They're very important. At this point in the Kohberger case, the public has mostly been locked out of that discussion because a lot of the most important motions around this have been sealed. So we don't have a lot of facts around it. Bryan Kohberger is expected to go to trial in August, on the 11th of this year, August 11th. It is supposed to be an extremely long trial, 12 weeks. It doesn't seem like they have enough evidence to spend 12 weeks, but that's what's planned. It's all the way through November 7th. Now, Kohberger got his wish. The case has been moved to Boise, Idaho. That's nearly 300 miles from where the crime happened. The trial might be broadcast. I don't know yet. None of us know yet. And most of the hearings have been broadcast. There's a new judge, and we don't really know what decision he'll make. So those are in my view, the top 5 most anticipated true crime cases, the ones that we can say in advance. These are, assuming they really do go to trial, these are going to be absolutely hugely followed. A lot of people will be tracking these, trying to figure out what exactly will happen in these cases, these extremely important cases. Donna Adelson, Karen Reed, Stephen Stearns, Sean Diddy Combs, and Bryan Kohberger. Now, on Monday, we are going to be talking about 6 cases you might know a lot less about. Some of you might never have even heard of these 6 cases, but by the end of this year, you absolutely will have heard of these cases. These are extremely important cases, ones you will be following, and I want to at least introduce you to them. We're going to be talking about them all year. They're all set for trial this year in 2025. Now, as a reminder, on Wednesday, we have an interview with Richard Allen's attorneys. They will be coming on the channel answering your questions. I am going to be putting out a post. What are the questions you have for them? What are the things you want to find out? What did they think about the case? What did they think about how it went? What do they think about the appeal? I don't know what limits they'll place around what they will or won't answer, but I think it will be a great opportunity for us to learn about a case that we covered so intently for so long, because I went in person and did daily covering of what exactly had happened in that case. Now, if you have any questions, excuse me, if you have any questions, if you would put them in the chat and put question marks at the beginning, that'll help me to spot it. I'm seeing some questions in here from LM wanting to know about abuse of victims, and abuse of victims is very bad. So thank you, LM, for that question. Beverly, do you think it's a strong case against Kohberger? No, I don't think it is a strong case. I think it very much hinges on that DNA evidence. That one piece of evidence is very strong. The question is, what will his team be able to do with that? How, because we have been locked out of a lot of the debate over that piece of evidence. And so it's really hard to assess just how strong it is. As far as everything else around it, not super strong, but that might be really, really strong. And Beverly, glad you've been a member for 2 months. That's wonderful. Michael asking about the picture of him in his green shoes. Green shoes are awesome for Christmas. All right. Coffee cake. BK is innocent and thinking that someone else actually was responsible for the Orion Brotherhood was responsible. We will find out. Maybe. I mean, at least I would assume that his team will be allowed to present all of that evidence. We have been, and let me go on a rant for just a small moment before I get into the questions, and I'll try to scoot over there and look for the question marks. I'm going to stop right there. Okay. So one of the frustrating things to me as an attorney and as someone trying to report on these cases to you is when courts lock us out of the information that we need in order to assess and determine whether or not someone is actually guilty and whether or not they've been treated fairly by the courts. When we get locked out of that information, what that means is that the public may have a misimpression. We might think one thing, and in truth, if we had a full picture, we would believe something different. I think that's really wrong. I think public knowledge and information is extremely important. So one of the frustrating things to me is we are locked out of much in the Kohberger case. So that's one of the reasons too that I think it will be so closely followed. Not only is it sensational, but everybody's waiting for this information and wanting to find it out. Caroline wanting a national eyebrow registry. I don't know. Maybe that would have caught Bryan Kohberger. Is that your thought? Maybe that would be something. There was some other case I read recently where the eyebrows were like an incredibly important point. So I guess if you have bushy eyebrows, it's something you have to be aware of. Don't commit crimes. All right. So I'm looking for the question marks over here. Which trial would I like to attend? Annie K asked. Oh, such a good question. I'm going to tell you what I am really interested in, and it's not going to be televised, and it's one I'm going to talk about on Monday, and that's the James Craig case out of Colorado. Very interested in that. Also incredibly interested in Lori Vallow Daybell's trial, where she's going to represent herself, but that may be televised, so that might be less important. So I am really interested in that. I also I've looked at these. I'm like, oh, I'd like to be at that one and this one. I would like to learn more about this, but obviously I can't be gone the entire year. So I'm going to have to pick and choose. The Brooks Houck case is also quite interesting, and I don't know if it will be televised or reported on, and I think that one should be covered. That's another case where it's a horrific crime, but there's not a lot of evidence, and it's really going to be interesting to see what the prosecution brings to the table. But so far, they've been pretty transparent and allowed the hearings to be broadcast. So we will find out. Willie Taylor asking about Richard Allen being given a fair trial. I do believe that evidence was kept out of the case that should have been included in the case. I just believe that he should have been allowed to present some of the evidence that the judge kept out. And I think I said from the very beginning, I think that's terrible that this is being kept out because it's creating this bomb inside the case that can explode on appeal. And you don't want that. You want a clean case so that when it goes up on appeal, the court says, well, it looks like it was a pretty fair trial. You may not like what the jury did, but it seemed like a pretty fair trial. The last thing you want to do is plant a problem inside your case. And it's a problem that was planted early on. So I think that was a tremendous shame. All right, Holly, are you planning to attend a trial in person? Same question. Hey, I would be interested. What do y'all think? And you can maybe vote for today, but I especially want you to vote on the ones that I talk about on Monday, because those are a little bit less known, and I would be very intrigued by what you think about this. Some of them, one of the things that I like to do is I see this as something where I can teach people, give information about what happens at the trial and information about what occurs. But for a case that's going to be televised, it's maybe a service I can offer, but it's less important. I could just watch the trial on TV just like anyone else could. And then I can talk about it and summarize it, do clips. But if there's a case where the public is not being allowed to see it, where it's not being televised, that one seems really especially important to me, because then the function is I'm not only explaining it or talking about what happened in the case, I'm also just telling you, because there would be no other way to access the information. It's going to be very brief reports from newspapers, and that's going to be the only communication into the trial for the public. So that's how I see it. I rank those as very important. Noodles. Oh, thank you. Not a question, just showing some love to Lee. Happy New Year. Thank you. What a nice comment, Noodles. Tennis Girl. Well, I covered the Brad Simpson case, San Antonio, Texas, trial date February 2025. But Tennis Girl thinks it will be postponed. I don't even know about that one, Tennis Girl. I will definitely take a look into that. I don't know about that one. There's one starting tomorrow, Monday, I think, that seems very interesting. And the reason it seems really interesting is it's a case out of Tennessee where some of the evidence was found by the family. According to the newspaper article I read, they broke into the defendant's home and found this evidence. Now, the state has agreed not to use that evidence, but it's, quote, admissible. That is really interesting just from a legal standpoint. Is that okay? Do we approve of that? What do we think about that? But I don't know. I don't think I'll have time to get into that and cover it on a daily basis. Maybe we can take at least a little bit of a look at that one. What does the law say about secondary transfer DNA being a way for someone like Kohberger to be innocent and not at the crime scene? Musical Neptunian is asking me that. It's not so much the law there as just factual. The law would simply say the expert comes in and explains the way that it's transferred, talks about the two experts battle. One says, oh, well, this is just secondary transfer DNA. Kohberger didn't have to even be there. And the other one says, how does his DNA get at the scene if he's not actually present? And they battle, and then the jury makes a decision. I don't think it would be something that would be ruled out. I just think the experts would come and talk about what they believe the facts would show, and then the jury would make the decision. Sally, how about the Courtney Clenny trial? That is true. That was a very important trial too. I don't know if that's set for trial this year or not. Interesting question. I have to look at that one too. Angelique asked me, why didn't they charge Diddy with the guns charge where he scratched off serial numbers? I don't know the answer to that. Can't answer that. They may just have felt like they had so many charges already. And for all I know, maybe they did actually include a charge that would include that. I don't know the answer to your question exactly. LJ, am I going to cover the Maxwell Anderson trial out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin? I don't know that. This is good. This is really good. The more you put in there, the more I can learn about cases that are maybe a little bit underreported and undercovered. And I feel like that's a real benefit, that people would like to learn about these. And I think the public should know about them. So please put those in. And that's one I don't know about. Abby PJ is asking me the deposition of Robert Adelson. Parts of it were unsealed today. Very interesting. I haven't read them yet. Can't wait to read those. Will he testify at her trial? I don't think so. I really do not believe so. We'll see, but my guess is no. Robert being the son of Donna, the only one not involved in some way, either as a witness or defendant at any point in the Markel matter. And I assume that's still the case after the deposition was unsealed. Jackie, if Stephen Stearns gets the death penalty, how long is the average length of time on death row? So, Jackie, that is such a good question. It is a very, very long time. I've done some stats on that in the past. I can't call it offhand, but it's multiple years. It's not something that happens right away, and it's very expensive. So that is always something that prosecutors are thinking about and considering. Friend of St. Frank is a new member. Fantastic. Glad to have you. Sky Goddess is saying, Happy New Year to me and to the mods. Thank you. And Happy New Year to all of you. Thank you, Sky Goddess. I appreciate that. And Jebby Canfor has been a member for 5 months. That is awesome. Glad to have you. All right, headed back over to questions. All right, hopefully I didn't miss anybody by going back and forth. Luigi Security question. I'm not sure, WB, what exactly you were asking about. One of the things I mentioned at the beginning of the live stream is the Luigi Mangione case is extremely interesting to me. I've posted on that. I've done videos on that. I will continue to do that all year. It is not currently set for trial. So tonight I was focusing on cases that I thought would be that are set to go to trial and that I think are at least have a good chance of going to trial this year. I think it's unlikely his case will go to trial this year. It probably from the outside will look pretty slow. Not a lot of information will get released, probably, at least on the state of New York side. If it gets prosecuted and pushed on the federal side, we may get a little more information about it over the course of the year. But New York, there's very little information that leaks or comes out. So we just won't have a lot of additional information to go on. Rosemary, what about Rex? Rex Heuermann, also something I completely agree. Very important case. I also mentioned that at the beginning. It was supposed to be set for trial this year. Instead, in December, when the court was going to set it for trial, there was a brand new murder charge against Rex Heuermann. And that charge then delayed everything. There's no set trial date. So my guess, probably not going to happen this year. I didn't include him just because we don't have an actual trial date. And I was trying to be pretty specific about what I was covering. WB, Brian Thompson security. So I think what he's saying is, why didn't Brian Thompson have security when Luigi Mangione shot him? I don't know. These are questions that should absolutely be answered. I don't know if he usually did, and this was the one exception. And if so, why not? Pretty important question. Okay, looking for question marks at the beginning. What about Corey Richins? Remember, be sure to hit the subscribe button with notifications on Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern. We will be covering 6 really important, absolutely intriguing true crime cases that are also going to go to trial in the coming year, but that are maybe a little less known. And I'm not going to reveal anything, Jebby, but maybe, just maybe, Corey Richins will be on that list. That is a fascinating case. We have some catching up on that case to do. And I'm going to be talking in the next weeks about the James Craig case. That's extremely interesting, very disturbing case out of Colorado. And I think a lot of people will be following and interested in that. Do you think the Jim McCabe search will be taken from the defense? Donna J. asks. I don't. who knows? The judge has typically ruled against the defense in that case. That's true in many cases. It's true in the Karen Read case. I do think that she might do that. I think it's more likely she'll just say, everybody bring your experts and battle it out in front of the jury. That's sort of a safer position for a court to take. So that's my guess as to how she'll rule, rather than just eliminate it altogether. I mean, after all, that very same argument was made by someone who came from Celebrite at Karen Read's trial. Someone came and said, we've changed the whole program, or at least we know there was this mistake. Now they've corrected the program, but that was pretty much something we learned about last time. So I don't think it's brand new information truly. So my guess is she'll say to everybody, I just bring your experts and you can cross-examine. That's kind of my guess. Oh, this is a hard one. Candy is awesome asked me. She says, how likely is it that they will be able to find a truly unbiased jury for Karen Read, considering how widely known the case is? I don't think you can. You can never find a completely and truly unbiased jury. They will do their absolute best. And you would be surprised how many people will not have heard of the Karen Read case, but it's going to get smaller and smaller. This will be a lot smaller than the number who showed up last time who had never heard of the case. Last time, they didn't require that the person had never heard of the case, just that they had not pre-decided the case. So we will see. I think they'll need to call in a whole bunch of people in order to winnow it down to people who don't know so much about the case that they've already made a decision. Debbie is saying that in Canada, there are some cases going to trial that Debbie is interested in. Debbie Jarvis. Let me know about those, Debbie. We cross international boundaries. In fact, a full 25% or more of you are not even from the US. And I know that from some stats that YouTube gives me. So I'm not at all limited to cases in the United States. It's just a little easier for me to understand. In fact, on Monday, we're going to cover one that's filed in the Bahamas that will be under British law. So that will be interesting, and we can talk about that when it comes to that. Defiantly Joyful 68 is a new member. Welcome. So glad to have you. All right, I am going, whichever isn't televised is Tarn's vote. And I agree. I think that's where I can add a little value, because it's not a case you can find something out about. Scott wants to know if Luigi's fan club will help his case in a jury trial. Scott, this is such an important issue that lawyers and the judicial system are not really focused on right now. The social environment is really important now. And I don't think lawyers really understand it. Lawyers don't even know exactly how it impacts or how much it impacts. One thing I can tell you for sure is it matters. It absolutely matters. So yes, I think that having a fan club will help his case in a jury trial. We'll just have to see how it pans out. They will carefully screen the jury members, hoping to exclude anybody who has any tendency in that way. They'll do their very best. Will the cases I talk about on Monday be televised? Tree asked. Some will and some won't. So it's a mix of the two. And so be sure to hit, though, the subscribe button. Also, if you would hit the like button, that'll really help the video get out, and I would appreciate it. All right, we'll answer like one more question, maybe two. I'm looking for question marks at the beginning, and I think we have another new member I need to shout out and say hello to. Okay, Sunset Gazing. How could Bryan Kohberger not have evidence in his car with the amount of carnage that he supposedly managed to do in such a short period of time? I think we're missing so much information in that case. I find it personally really frustrating. I do think it's a shame that we don't have more information. I would say this, though. He is obviously someone with training, because he was actually studying criminology. Did he cover the entire car in plastic? I don't know. And then throw it all out? I can't imagine how. I agree with you that it seems bizarre that he wouldn't have bloody clothes and other things, and I think the prosecution will argue that when he did that drive afterwards, before the phone came on, that they believe he threw out the evidence during that time period, but we don't know. We're left guessing without a whole lot of information. All right, so let's see. We Defiantly Joyful is a new member. Cat Artist has been a member for 4 months. Um, Stephen Stearns for Maddie Soto Unalive. I think that Stephen Stearns is one of the top 5 cases of the year, and by that I mean cases where everybody is not only already talking about it, but they will be talking about it all year, and it is expected to go to trial. Abellis is a new member. Welcome. I will see you all Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern. I have forgotten my outro for the night. So I will just have to say thank you all for watching, and I will see you Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern.